Welcome back to A Better Conversation, a podcast put on by Better Dallas. As always, I'm your host, Chris Clement, joined by the man, the myth, not really the mustache, more like the beard now. I think we're full-time on that. Kyle Mason.
Yes, thank you. The government shutdown is allowing me to continue to grow my beard. Reserves are being pushed off, and I'm excited to be here tonight to cut through all the smoke and the gossip on what is going on north of us in Celina.
Pete Hegseth giveth and taketh away, right?
Give us, and take it away. I thought he was going to give us beards, but I guess not.
Well, most importantly, we have with us our special guest for the night, Ms. Tami Brown Rodriquez, who, if you don't know her, kind of shame on you, but Tami is Vice President of Grassroots Mobilization for A Better Dallas. More importantly, she is a leader in the anti-trafficking space. She is a leader in protecting children, not only in Texas, but across the country. Not only is she a total policy guru pushing bills all over the country, but she's actually on the front lines helping to save people, helping to rehabilitate them, helping to get them back into a semblance of a normal life. So thank you for all that you do, Tami. But we wanted to bring you on to be able to talk to you about that and some of the things that are happening in the local North Texas area.
Yes, and boy, are things happening. I find it interesting in this space where so many people don't believe it's happening in this country, whether it's exploitation, whether it's trafficking or grooming. And what we're seeing, especially here in Texas, is it seems like it's ramping up, right? Like we're seeing more and more in the news cycle of dynamics that we wish didn't exist. And I would love to see a time where I wouldn't have to go rescue kids. Like we need to stop it before it happens. But until we can do that, we've got to ensure different ways to fortify and protect our kids, our families, and really train our parents of what to look for, because it starts in the home, as you know.
Well, a question that I have on that, actually just sort of, I know this is not what we talked about in pre-production, but you talk about it being more prevalent. Is it that the bad acts are occurring more, or is it that we're finally meaningfully addressing it so we're seeing more busts, basically?
That's such a great question because, I think about 10 years ago. Like, what were we talking about 10 years ago, right? And this is kind of unique because, as you know, in my family, my niece was trafficked, right, for 15 years. And praise God, she was found. We were able to extract her and get her into a safe house. But during that time, we had no idea what was going on. And now I think as the national conversation is shifting, where we're now talking about what are our kids seeing on the devices? What are our teachers teaching our kids? Mm-hmm. What is actually happening online? I think finally, after all these years, people are realizing, oh, it is a thing. It's not that those crazy right-wing extremists are calling people groomers. They are actually grooming our children and desensitizing them at such a young age where finally I think we're breaking through the noise. And that's really exciting for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, the grooming part, especially in culture, is something that was right in our face for so long, but you just almost don't want to believe that it's there because it feels more comfortable to just think that it's not there, right? It's easier to just look at the programming on TV or whatever the kids are seeing and saying, I don't know, that's not really grooming. They're not trying to do that to my kid. Because if you accept that they are, it creates a much darker reality that you live in.
Yeah. Well, think about like in the 1950s when like the music shifted and all those old people were like, they were clutching their pearls at the music. I think that's kind of what's happened to us, where for a while we were saying, no, that's not really what they're doing. And slowly but surely we're coming around going, holy crap, that's exactly what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And creating language so people can understand it. Because, does anybody really know what grooming is? 10 years ago, right, when you would say grooming, what would that mean to you?
Well, it meant, your better half said I had a great haircut.
That's exactly right.
I got my haircut. I got my beard done. I'm groomed. Kyle's groomed-ish.
Yes.
But yes, not what we're dealing with now.
Not what we're doing now. One thing that came to mind about grooming, to answer your question, was it was kind of like maybe in church or something. It'd be like the youth group. It'd be like the youth group leader. He was like 18 or 19. and as soon as a girl turned like 18 it was like 4 or 5 years difference.
Yeah.
But now this thing is like expanded to like teachers and students and whatnot, and kind of the frog in the boiling pot that I think the left has just pushed too hard with all these books and everything, and everyone woke up. It was like, well, that's kind of weird that you guys are wanting all these things in school. That's kind of my take on it, why everyone has woken up like that, coming to the forefront.
I love that it feels like we've woken up like that. I've been fighting the books in school for 5 years. And one of the greatest gifts, and I'm going to just say this publicly, is that the one great gift from COVID is that people are now like, they're seeing it. Because when I got that list of 285 books in Texas, and I put together this little reading club, and we went through these books, and we had all these people reading this completely inappropriate content. We had people from 12 to 13 years old who started giving us these books, all the way to our dear friend, I think Charles is probably like 82 or something. He's this little sweet pastor, and he was even reading these books. So we were all just looking at each other thinking, I can't even believe we're seeing this. And then we started really socializing it and getting people to be aware, because even my own mother was like, well, I mean, that's, you're so religious, or I'm a prude, or I'm too conservative. And then she sees these books and she's like, oh, this is a whole different level.
Right. Well, that was the thing that I think a lot of people failed to realize, because here's the deceptive reporting that I would see on it. They would take some book that was a little risky. There were certainly some of the like X-rated stuff.
Yeah.
But they'd find some that are on the cusp and talk about 17-year-olds reading it.
That's right.
I was like, well, that's not the problem. That book was on the list because it was in an elementary school, right? You had K through 5 exposed to that book. Why in the world would a K through 5 student need to be exposed to any sort of human sexuality or anything along those lines? Like, they are entirely too young to be dealing with that.
And I mean, and I'm grown, and I'm reading this stuff blushing and being like, what? Like, this was a whole different level. And I think if we look at schools in general, our education in general, and let's go ahead and pull that thread into our culture in general. When you've got little girls, God bless my sweet husband. We were in Hawaii just a couple of weeks ago, and we're at the beach. And he's like, I don't know where to look. And I'm like, oh, babe, it's because you have 12, 13, and 14-year-old girls in thong bikinis.
Yes.
And we were sitting at the beach watching everybody, and you see these moms with their thongs, with their little girls with their thongs, and somehow we've got 6 and 7-year-old girls wanting those same bathing suits.
Yeah.
And once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And so Daniel and I it was a little traumatizing. I'm not going to lie.
No.
And so understanding how this has desensitized culture, I'm hoping that we just swung way too far to the left, and now we're coming back to the plumb line.
Look, we need a new bill that regulates the bikini manufacturers
Oh my gosh.
for making children's thongs. Like,
Yeah.
I'm all for individual liberties, but I mean, like, if you're making a thong for a 12-year-old girl, shame on you.
Yeah.
The culture is just absolute trash. And I think someone could make a real big buck if they came out with a really good-looking line of one pieces. I think people would buy that, really.
Yep.
And when you do go to the beach, I was in Florida not too long ago, and I remember there was one lady wearing a one piece, and I just thought, wow, thank you.
How modest. Yeah.
Yes, and it's just relieving.
Yeah.
You can kind of relax. I mean, just as a man, it's like, can I just relax and not force my mind not to wander?
Right.
So, anyways, that's...
And I think culturally, the information I'm getting, and, everybody always says, like, well, what's your source, right? Is that there is a huge shift in Gen Z, that they're going back to church, that they are not drinking as much, Like alcohol sales have plummeted for that particular age group. We're seeing more pro-life, and it's kind of exciting, right?
is.
It's kind of exciting, and I think it's happened because it was so far left and it was so far out of control.
Well, it's kind of the old school thing that as soon as your parents start doing it, it's lame. Like once you start having like these Gen Z kids and their parents are the blue-haired woke people trying to push, alternative sexualities on them, they're like, no, I don't like that. I mean, I think there may be some of it that's that. I hope it's just seeing. There's so much nihilism in millennials. There's so much like hopelessness and nothing matters and all that sort of stuff. I kind of wonder if Gen Z kind of sees that and has that thought of like, I don't want that. I don't want to have that worldview. I don't want to think that everything is pointless and nothing matters. I'd rather, follow Christ and have a purpose to my life.
And and that's such a great segue into like thinking through this last year on what I've been able to do in the policy space and thinking about, actually it's the last 2 years, right? Because I was during the interim, I did all the research, but I'm seeing this fight that we were just in and all the positive policies. I think my total number now is 82 bills passed in 20 different states.
And we're not talking about naming post offices, like substantive policy.
Yeah, this is like age verification on porn websites. This is like ensuring that enhancing penalties for traffickers, enhancing penalties of sexual crimes against children. This is working with survivors who've had maybe they got in trouble and they had a prostitution charge while they were being trafficked.
Right.
Being able to go in and seal that, right? So that it doesn't affect the rest of their lives. Like real meaningful things. Here in Texas, of course, repealing the obscenity exemption, way to go.
Right.
Just kind of saying. We did that.
That was a long time in the making.
That was over 5 years of that I worked on that project.
Right.
I know that there's other incredible members out there doing incredible work, but it's seeing that the undoing of some of these things that we've worked so hard because we finally understand what's causing it. I think there was some confusion there for a while of like, how do we get here?
Right.
And so it's really understanding how we got there.
Now, real quick, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are watching, because so many people watch the podcast, that don't know what the obscenity exception is, like, or what it was more accurately. Would you mind describing what that is?
So this is bananas. The obscenity exemption was implemented around 1971, and that was the purpose of it was to say that content that society may find obscene, we want to be able to use that for educational purposes, such as like in biology class, being able to show ovaries when you're teaching the reproductive cycles, right? Well, that kind of snuck in, got implemented, and because of the obscenity exemption, it's been bastardized. Yeah. So they would use that as an excuse. So if you were to take one of those books, let's say Kiss 8 or Lawnmower Boy or any one of those horrible books, if you were to take that book to show a child off school campus as an adult, that would be harming a child. Yep. That is illegal because of the graphic nature of the things, right? All the porn things that were in there. Yep. But in school, you show the same book under educational the obscenity exemption. It was fine.
Right.
It's fine. It says giving them safe harbor and a place to actually victimize people. Again, a lot of people haven't read these books or even looked at snippets of it. I mean, it is smut. Is what it is. It is smut, and then some of them too. I mean, some of the worst examples too are like, just actual like how to do sexual acts.
Yes.
Right? And it's like that has nothing to do with the 5th grade video that you watch about reproductive systems and then not having sex before marriage or something.
And certainly not teaching boys how to seduce an adult male
Right.
and how to have
Yeah.
same-sex relations, like
Yeah.
it to the detail, it was horrifying. And so I think we've moved through that. I think the public has accepted that to be true because it is. And now it's, what do we do with it? Now the states that are repealing the obscenity exemption, we're going to see a reckoning in the libraries. Now, interestingly enough, in here in Texas, we even have people going to the public libraries. And now, because there could be cause, even though in that bill, which I think it was SB 412, it spoke to public school libraries, there's a thread, and the public libraries could also be held under same account. So in Irving, one of our fellow amazing, Elena Blake, she's taken on City Hall to clean up their libraries. And so there is a potential thread that could also affect our public libraries to at least secure that content away from kids.
Right.
So age appropriate. So that's, I think, really one of the things we've done really well is begin to message we're not book banning, it's just age appropriate.
So the great thing, so look, the part of this that makes me proud to be an American is that when people were talking about book banning, you had such a initial visceral reaction against it.
Yeah.
Right. Like we love the First Amendment so much in this country that just the outset of like, oh, they're trying to ban books in Texas got everybody's heckles up. And I love that. But this is where you do the work. It's one of the things that we talk about a lot within A Better Dallas on this podcast is that not enough people are willing to actually do the work to win the battle of ideas. Something that I'm so proud of the work that you do is you do that all of the time. Like you are always championing ideas. You're working with whoever you need to be working with in order to get those goals accomplished. And in this case, being able to inform families and do the hard work. Because I mean, gosh, how many people did you have to talk to? How many meetings did you have to go to? How many silly podcasts did you have to go on to spread that message of like, no, we're not trying to ban books, but I don't want your 4-year or I don't want your 4th grader to be looking at, the Lawnmower Boy.
Yep. And let's drill this down. So the grooming of my niece began in the schools. Full stop. So the schools had a special place in my heart to understand what was actually going on. As a former sub, like I played that game in Colleen back in like 90. And it was weird because I was young, right? So the age difference wasn't a lot and it was just weird. But understanding like how this affects real life cases, right? If you show these kids these images, there are studies after studies after studies show the brain chemistry changes.
Right.
And it is changed forever. And what happens when an 8-year-old is exposed to these pornographic images and it changes their brain chemistry forever, they're seeing these porn things, because that's the average age of kids being introduced to porn right now is 8.
Ugh.
So they see these porn things, they do the porn things on each other, and so the spike of boys raping boys is off the charts, and they think it's normalized because they saw it on their dad's or their mom's or their own iPhone, right?
Right, they all have phones now,
All
or
of them.
tablets with
All of
Wi-Fi
it.
access, yeah.
And then they go to school, and that dynamic that they experienced is reinforced.
Right.
So now this is the very definition of grooming, right? So now you've got at every turn, this hypersexuality is reinforced and it's reinforced. And then a teacher will say, you can tell me anything. Oh, this is our secret. You've got a case right now. And I think you may know, I think it's in Colorado, or is it in Texas, where a school was transitioning somebody's kid without them knowing it.
Yeah. I think it was in Colorado.
I think it was in Colorado. So you're transitioning. It's not bad enough you're talking about things I don't want you to talk to my kid about, but you're transitioning them. So all of a sudden, you've got the isolation, you've got the normalization, and then you've got the secrets, and you've got the shame. And that is a dangerous, dangerous combination.
The training the kids thing, they just have no foot left to stand on. I mean, You can tell your kid anything and they will believe it. Like, you just tell them anything enough times and they'll believe it. You know, everyone knows growing up you believed everything, and it's just like they don't know what they want. It's ridiculous. And I love well, can they go get a tattoo? Can they go get a Fortnite tattoo right now? Well, no. It's the whole thing is just, start putting these people in jail. Let me ask you something.
Let's start putting them in jail. Yes, please. I've been working on it.
How far down the road do you think we are until we can actually ban porn because of mental health issues?
You know what? I love that question, and I'm going to tell you why I love that question. I've got 21 states that have passed a resolution of porn being a public health hazard.
Oh, that's perfect.
And that's one of my pet projects. Texas has not yet done that, which I asked them last session and they couldn't get to it. But let me tell you, when you go into a legislator's office and I have my slate of bills that I present and I kind of walk them through grooming and all the indicators, and I say, porn is a public health hazard, I can't tell you how many staffers and legislators look at me and go, what? It's just porn. And so instantly it's like, okay, I need to wind this back up and explain what it does to the brain, how it desensitizes, how we have a crisis in our country for physical health and mental health. And there's been a bunch of studies around it. For some reason, the Air Force has done studies on porn and effects of men, which I think is interesting. But it is a direct correlation, I can tell you. And as we explore the different ways to protect our kids, what they're seeing is everything. I tell all parents, and this is extreme, but no devices for kids. Like, keep them off devices as long as possible. And then you have to introduce it into responsible device use.
Right. Well, it's just like any tool. Like, you just have to learn the right way to use the tool. You can't walk around swinging a hammer constantly, right? It's got a purpose and it's got a time. One of the things that I found to be the most despicable when Texas was implementing not a ban on pornography, age verification requirements.
Yep. Come on.
Just saying, hey, make sure, hey, you're the one that's making millions of dollars off of this website. Make sure that kids aren't looking at it. And the fact that the porn industry chose to just shut down access to their websites in the state of Texas and essentially try to blackmail people into advocating for allowing there to be no age verifications on porn websites showed exactly what they're trying to do, because they know. I wish, I don't know if we have this, I would love to see the statistics on the drop of traffic on some of those porn websites as soon as the ban went into play, or not the ban, but as soon as age verification went into place. Where it's like, oh, if you actually have to make sure that kids aren't getting it, I wonder how much their traffic dropped. How many, like you said, 8 to 17-year-old boys were no longer able to access that website.
Well, and HB 1181 is one of my favorite bills of all time, not just because I worked on that project, but because the porn industry sued Texas after we passed it, and after Governor Abbott signed it, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And I was fortunate enough to write an amicus brief in support of Paxton against the Free Speech Coalition. And it's interesting because as soon as they shut down Pornhub in Texas, interestingly enough, there were over 1,500 free YouTube porn sites that Pornhub created. So they found a way under Section 230, which is we'll save that for another day, folks, where it just opened up free porn. And so as we went through that and having these conversations where we're saying, look, we're not going to harm you as an adult. We just want to put it into measure to protect our kids from obscenity and from content that simply serves no purpose for them whatsoever. And yes, is a 12-year-old boy going to steal their dad's ID and upload it into some mechanism? Well,
that could
sure.
happen.
Of course.
Yes.
It's just still a barrier to entry.
Correct.
It's just a barrier to entry.
Chris, to answer your question, in Louisiana, after the state implemented the verification, Pornhub reported an 80% drop in traffic in the state. The UK, following new age verification, had a 77% fall as well. The popularity with the VPNs now have increased, so a lot more people are getting onto porn sites using a VPN. For it's going to be out of the United States. That was one thing traveling abroad too. The first time I ran into that was like when you go into like South Korea or something, like they're like no on the porn.
That's they're
Because they're
absolutely
like,
not.
because they really do believe, like deep down, they're like, no, this makes people commit sexual
Yep.
crimes.
Welcome back. Now free of technical difficulties.
Yep.
So we were discussing a little bit the work that you've done in the, I'll just say, anti-child pornography or anti-children having access to pornography space. I want to move and talk a little bit more about the work that you did specifically with accountability for schools with regard to protecting kids and failures to do so.
One of the most amazing seasons of my life was this last year and a half to 2 years, when I remember you and I at the resolution table at the Dallas County Republican Party as we were working for our Senate convention, and I brought a resolution to the table. And you and I were both on that committee, and I said, hey, Chris, this is what I want to do. And just as I talked to any attorney, that always the hairs on the back of the head go up. So what's interesting, folks, is that if you don't know, most states have what they call sovereign immunity for school districts, right? The ISD, independent school districts, you can't sue them, right? They have protection. And I understand, in essence, it's because they don't want people to sue them for, like, I don't like the way you teach math. I get it. But when you're covering up sex crimes, sexual misconduct complaints against teachers with children, I'm going to take issue.
Right.
And so we had this resolution, we talked about it, and you're like, I don't, that's a big ask. That's a big ask. And asking for legislators to vote to be able to pierce the veil of sovereign immunity, especially in Texas, which literally is the gold standard for the nation, that was huge. And to be able to figure out a way, and through you and I, like, really working on that resolution and figuring out the language and figuring out what was the end result that we wanted, not to bankrupt school districts, you guys, but to hold them accountable. Because look, everybody has this assumption that when you drop your kid off at school, and if something happens to your child, that they'll be accountable, that the teacher's best interest for that kid. Well, we uncovered 6,888 sexual misconduct complaints against teachers that went uninvestigated, unanswered, just hung out at the Texas Education Agency. That's a problem. That could have been any one of our kids. And let's be clear, that wasn't the number of complaints, that was the number of teachers, right?
Right.
We actually had over 39,000 misconduct complaints that were either in abuse in nature, neglect in nature, or sexual misconduct in nature. Over 39,000. How do I know? Because I sifted through all 39,000 of them and being able to break them up. And I decided it was probably most effective to really hone in on the sexual misconduct. Not that physical neglect or abuse is any less offensive in our schools, but we had to really start somewhere, right?
Well, the thing that, at least in my opinion, you did a good job of is you weren't wed to any particular language. Your goal was, I need to get here. I need legislation that gives these tools to parents. So how do we construct this bill in a way that gets me those tools? And this is something that I feel like is currently a lost art in politics. You were willing to actually accept criticisms. You were willing to consider the perspective of the opponents of the bill and say, okay, how can I address your concerns while not compromising the main point of the bill? Yeah. You didn't take the approach that if you have criticism of this bill, you must be a pedophile. That's right. You must be evil if you have any criticisms of the bill. You didn't try to shut down anybody that had anything to say about it. That's why you were able to get it passed, because you got to the point where the legislatures that were raising some of these concerns to you were like, well, I can't really object to it now because you put a $500,000 cap on there. You added this language that put a standard out that actually could be legally enforceable.
Yeah, in that process, I remember during the interim, and we just had elections, and so we had a lot of freshmen, right? And I went, and when I'd go to Austin once a week, I'm booking 10 to 20 meetings a day, and we go back to back to back meetings. And I remember taking this report and visiting with all these legislators, and I specifically remember the day I saw Mitch Little. And he's looking at me and he's like, there's no way. Like, he leaned back in his chair and he was rolling his eyes at me going, sovereign immunity, there's no, like, he's like, come on, like. And then after he met with our Marath, he realized, oh, there is a really big problem. And it was interesting to see the evolution of support, because having somebody like Representative Mitch Little, who is an attorney. He's a brilliant attorney. He has spent a long time of his life actually prosecuting sexual crimes in schools. It really was like the perfect marriage. And then to be able to have somebody as level-headed as him, and then I would go socialize with all these other reps and senators, and to see the evolution of buy-in, right? Because at first they just kind of looked at me. I had to break it down of why it's a problem. And Representative Leach, like, what a gem. When I first testified, he kept going back to like, wait a minute, like a police officer just can't come in? And so as we kind of educated and not wrote people off, but like got their buy-in to explain the gravity of the problem, it was amazing to see that shift. And also to understand we're not anti-school district. It's not an us against them. What we are is, let's hold them to account. And if your school district isn't hiding misconduct complaints, incredible. You have nothing to worry about. But if you have a culture inside the school similar to what we're seeing in the Celina case, then we have a problem.
Yeah, that's what anytime the right wants to do anything with schools or public schools, it comes off as an attack, or at least that's how it's framed. It goes back to school choice, goes back to the books, goes back to this. But I like how you did start off with kind of like the worst thing. I think it's going to open the door to other things, but it is really hard for the teachers union or whoever say, well, no, hold on, like, don't worry about those 39,000 incidences. Who's filing those? Is that like the principals filing a little bit? The parents are dropping notices? Like, where
That's a
does all
great
this come
question.
from?
So not only did I have to and remember, guys, like, I'm not an attorney. I did not go to law school. I have an actual degree in theater, which is kind of hilarious. I mean, it's true, but
That's why you're such a lovely podcast.
That's exactly right. So one of the things I had to figure out was, where is the ball dropping? So not only did we have to understand, like, where do these complaints go? And how are they filed? Who's held to account? What is the statute? I had to unpack under the Texas Education Code. I had to unpack the penal codes. I had to understand, what sovereign immunity even was, why they get to enjoy it. And what was interesting is that there had been precedents set in the great state of Texas to where if it had to do with the transportation, a school vehicle, so that was waived, you could sue.
That's the Texas Tort Claims Act.
Yeah.
101021.
Yeah, of course he would know. But that was the one, caveat. And so when I found that nugget, that morsel, that juicy bit of goodness, I was able to, there's precedent, and there's precedent in other states. But to answer your question, we had multiple layers of bills. I had actually 5 bills that needed to be filed to really affect this misconduct complaint process. And 4623 was the remedy where we could sue. But what we had to shift was the fact that schools didn't have to report teacher complaints within the 24 to 48 hours, what we like to call immediate, as for the family code requires. So teachers do a great job. If you think a parent is abusing a kid, That teacher will make a report. They'll contact CPS
Sure.
right away, right? Because they're mandatory reporters.
Right.
What they're not mandatory reporters on, well, until now, teacher is
Teachers.
colleague complaints.
Yeah.
And so the statute was really stringy, where you could report either to, the TEA or to, they were reporting up to their principal or their superintendent. They
Right.
weren't reporting out.
Oh, yeah.
And effectively, you want to give your superiors the opportunity to remedy the situation and investigate to find out the dynamics of whether it's true or not. But what's so upsetting is that if that superintendent even did investigate it, then you would be investigating your own people internally, right? Which is really, I don't know whether I think it's a good idea or not. Like if my dad's a cop and he got a case across his desk and it was his buddy, he would recuse himself because it's his buddy.
It's a really tough situation.
Right? And so if you've got your own police force on your ISD police and you were told that there was a problem, like with my niece, they'd be like, oh, well, we know her. Like, Dakota's a mess. Like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
so there was already prejudice. And then how about investigating those teachers? There potentially could be prejudice because these are the people you have to see every day. So what we wanted, I think the initial ask was we wanted superintendents to be obligated to report to outside law enforcement.
Right.
That was my initial, that was a non-negotiable for me. I don't believe we got that done.
No.
But because then we have somebody on the outside. Now, you've got superintendents that are reported to the TEA, and they've got this longevity of time frame that they can report it to. Then that goes to the TEA, and they didn't investigate it; just sat there.
Well,
So how do
of
you
course,
know?
they're protecting their own?
Well, but even how do you know if it's true or not? Because you know what? If it's not true, let's investigate it to find out if it's not true.
Right.
So just to have this backlog of complaints that we were able to do a PIR and get from the TEA gave us everybody's names, the number of
I'm
complaints.
sure they're happy to hand that over, right?
Well, what's interesting
There you
is
go.
that when I broke it down to each Senate district and each House district, I can't tell you how many of the same name was across those districts, where some of them had up to 147 complaints.
And I guess it's a really good example. We did the same thing in the military when it was like with the sexual assaults and complaints. Routing it up your chain of command didn't do anything for anybody. It was a disaster. As soon as people were able to report outside the chain of command, the headlines is sexual assaults are exploding in the military. It's like, no, they're probably about the same. They're finally getting exposed.
Right.
And now it's trending down.
And that was the IG model, right?
I don't know what model it was, but I know at some point that
The Inspector General, kind of
Yes,
like an Inspector General model where, and there was a subset that was really committed for that to be the solution,
Yeah.
for us to have an independent Inspector General. But what we understood to be true, and I'm for small government, is that a good option? I don't know. But my personal opinion was, look, I don't know if layering a bigger bureaucracy is effective.
Right.
Why don't we just fix what we have? Now, so once we were explaining the process of complaints to legislators, I literally had to draw a flow chart, not because our legislators aren't smart,
Right.
but because of the complexity.
Right.
Right.
And
Flow
so-
charts are great. I love flow
Yeah,
charts.
it was like I drew the flow chart, and they're like, oh. And so understanding what we have to unpack in order for 4623 to be effectual. And then we had SB 571, which was the reporting bill. Well, everyone was so focused on 4623, 571 is problematic because what that did is some of the guardrails we need to have in order for a complaint to be investigated, to be able to get to 4623. One problem, for example, is if that complaint is not investigated within a year, it's destroyed. There's no record of that complaint even going in.
That makes no sense at all.
That's a problem. The other problem is moving forward, only law enforcement can do a PIR.
Yeah.
Which
Sorry,
is a
what
PIR
PIR again?
is a public information
Okay.
request.
So you have to get like a police officer or sheriff to submit.
because like they won't give it to Tami Brown Rodriquez.
Yeah, so that's not, so part of that actually stems from the AG's office, because the AG's office is very hesitant when you have child abuse cases, for example. I mean, the AG's office will tell you you are not allowed to disclose in a public information. It is a mandatory, withholding.
But we're not.
If it's related to child abuse.
But if it's not, but the issue is, we didn't request the child's name was never disclosed. It was just the complaint of the complaint itself.
Right.
And so when that happened, I immediately turned in. Well, that of course went into effect September 1st. So I immediately went and filed another PIR for July 2024 through September 1. So we had the fresh updated data to see if this trend continued on after 2024. So there's some things that you have to you're spinning plates and you have to figure out, there's 5 other bills. But I think what really is important is understanding the template. And now I've got 5 other states that want our 4623, but they need to research their own complaint process, like Tennessee
Right.
and Arkansas. They have a whole different complaint process because every state is unique and different.
Sure.
But it's exciting when we see it implemented so soon, because as we were talking about HB 1181 with having to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and Chris can kind of speak into this, why it's so valuable for a bill to be challenged. Like, why is that so important?
Well, because you don't have. So often what ends up happening is you have it floating out there in the ether. You have this bill, nobody knows how enforceable it is, what it actually will have, what the effect will be. But when you do have the set challenge and you do have it go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court looks at it and says, legit, they bless it, this is good, this is constitutional. Now, if you take away all those guessing games, you take away all of the collateral lawsuits that will come with the enforcement of that, it's really, really helpful for mostly an enforcement and administrative of the legislation that gets passed. Which is also why one of the things that I like about 4623 is it's largely just the teeth, right? So here's the game to watch in legislation. You will see these bills, and they will have these really powerful names that make you think they're doing a lot. And there will be stuff in that bill that requires that they do this, or this, all this stuff, right? It's got all these nice requirements, and you can wave it around and say, look what I did. Mm-hmm. But there is no enforcement mechanism. Or it's an enforcement mechanism that's essentially, if it's looked at by some bureaucrat, they may have the discretion to do something. So there's tons of bills that get passed that look like they're actually meaningful, but because there is nothing you can do to enforce it, it doesn't make it a criminal offense. It doesn't establish what civil penalties will be. Most importantly, it doesn't allow for a private cause of action, right? There's lots of, and I'm going to say this as an attorney that represents the government, I benefit from that all the time, where my client will get sued for something and it's like, oh, sorry, there's no private cause of action for that. You can't sue based upon XYZ. You're going to have to get the AG to do something or a DA to do something. Kind of like we have with a lot of the stuff in the election code, right? There is nothing an individual can do to make sure that that's enforced. Because, fun fact, you have no constitutional right to the enforcement of the law against other people. You have a constitutional right to laws not being unfairly applied to you, but you have no right to make sure that the law is applied accurately to somebody else. So somebody, for example, robs your house and you report it to the police and the police don't do anything.
Yeah.
You have no right to make them do something. Now, if they're not doing it for some sort of protected class thing, right? They're not doing it because you're a woman or because you're, a certain minority group or something along those lines. Sure, there's enforcement mechanisms. But within the Constitution itself, you have absolutely no right to have law enforcement enforce the law against other people.
And that's why 2 sessions ago, not this last session, but the session before, in the 88th, we did HB 17. So HB 17 was actually a law that we had to pass to say that the DAs had to do their job. That
Yes.
DAs, you cannot arbitrarily not prosecute as a matter of business
Right.
X crime.
It was called the Rogue DAs Act.
Yeah.
And it again, so here's the thing I want to make on that point. It had teeth, right? Because what it said is if you were a DA, and we had this in Dallas because of Let Him Go Crusoe, because he had this policy where you could steal up to $750 worth of stuff and it's okay. That was a departmental policy, right? They were not going to be prosecuting for that. The Rogue DAs Act said if you have something like that, if you have a policy of not enforcing the law, that is a removable from office offense, right? Like if you did that, you can be removed from your position. It gave a private cause of action to people to remove these people from office because they are elected officials. So that was great. It had teeth.
And the other one that I found fascinating, because remember I used to sit on the Community Police Oversight Board, and I remember Crusoe coming to the Community Police Oversight Board and petitioning us to agree that we shouldn't prosecute marijuana charges. And he wanted people to have, and I believe the number was, I mean, it was years ago, like up to 2 ounces.
It was, yeah.
And
That's a lot of.
and I'm like, because it's just marijuana. And I had to remind the DA that he is not a legislative body, and that is for the I did publicly. It was epic. And that is not our job as the Community Police Oversight Board. We're to enforce and ensure that and investigate if police were overreaching and breaking the law and how they navigate with the community, police brutality, so forth and so on. And why were you coming to us? Like he literally came to us to champion why he shouldn't have to do that. And now we know that he doesn't. I mean, we have,
Right.
however, something like that and being able to see it in a policy, like an inner office email or
Right.
it was just, I couldn't even believe it, especially when you look at the human trafficking space. There's always drugs. There's
Yeah.
always other crimes connected to it.
Yeah, that's
Well, 2 ounces,
manipulation, yeah.
2
A
ounces is a
ton.
distributable amount, right? I mean,
What else are you gonna
the,
do with-
The cartels would have loved that. Oh, so you're telling me that I can have guys on the street with up to 2 ounces on their person and it's okay? Deal.
I mean, even and especially nowadays with how potent marijuana is,
Holy-
it's not what
How do you know?
I mean,
I used
rumor
to
has
smoke
it.
pot. I used to smoke pot, but yeah, like I guess like back in the '90s, like 2 ounces. I mean, you know, it wasn't as potent as it is now, and it is funny that you say that because it really is that. It's like, hey, we go through all this process, we pass these bills, we do all this lobbying and door knocking stuff, but then you can have one DA or one judge be like, well, I'm going to enforce these laws and I'm not going to enforce these laws. And it's like, well, now you're kind of like the judge, obviously, but you're also kind of becoming the jury and the executioner and the legislator all in one. It's a very powerful position that we've overlooked for a long time at this point.
Well, you know, and to that point, in Texas, you know, we have 254 counties, and the AG's office has told us that there are only 10 counties in Texas that prosecute human trafficking crimes. 10. Now, why is that, you ask? That's such a great question.
Yeah.
It's because of the complexity of the crime. Because when it's with adults, you have to prove force, fraud, and coercion, right? You have to prove those elements. Like in the P. Diddy case,
Right.
where everybody knows, but because they built the case incorrectly, in my personal non-attorney opinion, the human trafficking charges were dropped. And they were dropped because the defendant, no, not the defendant, because Cassie agreed to it initially. So it was consensual until it wasn't.
Right.
But that's the line that's so complicated to be able to prove. And so another initiative that I'm working on is a federal human trafficking court, or rather a designated human trafficking court, Because if we can work with judges and prosecutors and really explain and work with this unique situation and this data set of crimes, then instead of everybody pleading it down, because what a prosecutor will say is, oh man, we can't prove that.
Yeah.
Like, you're a prostitute. Well, like 98% of prostitutes are being trafficked, right?
right.
So instead, we have to explain what that looks like and the mindset of the trafficker and the survivor, and how we can prosecute these more effectively so that survivors will actually come forward, because most survivors don't. Only 1% of sex crimes are even reported. But once they're found, they don't want to risk the public humiliation of their family members. Their trafficker uses threat. Like when my niece's situation, she had 6 children during the time that she was trafficked, and it was the father of her children, she had 3 different fathers, that trafficked her.
Right.
And so they would use threat
Leverage.
of, right?
Right.
And so this is a complicated dynamic, and if we could really streamline this so that judges get the reps, because they don't have the reps, so they don't, it's not a fault of the judges.
Right.
I feel like it's just culturally we need to take that
So,
shift.
so you're looking to build something like kind of like a probate court, but for human trafficking,
Yeah.
or something
Something
along
like
those-
bankruptcy court, yeah, but for human trafficking. So it's a designated court where instead of building, like, we're not building a whole new court system, we're just doing some cross designations
Right.
to where, like FISA, I mean, for better, right?
Right.
So it's, yeah.
We had that for a little bit in Dallas when Faith Johnson was the DA, because Faith Johnson set up some specialty courts and specialty diversion programs for human trafficking.
But were they for the perpetrator for diversion programs, or
No.
was it for the survivor?
For the victim. So for the prostitute, right?
Okay.
Because one of the things that they would find is you would have these prostitutes that would get picked up, they would get bailed out, and then they would get sent to Memphis because they were going someplace next, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what would happen to these girls is they would work in a city until they got picked up, and then they would get trafficked to another city, and that's just what would happen to them. And so what one of the specialty courts, I think they went away, I don't know for sure, but I know that we had them under Faith Johnson, was that these girls could go into a diversion program where it's like, you are being trafficked, so we're not going to prosecute you for the prostitution. We are going to try to help you get extricated from that situation and do all that sort of stuff. We have stuff that's not that, but you talk about like bankruptcy courts, but I mean, there are federal courts that develop an expertise in
Yes.
certain areas of law. So you don't have, like, for example, the Eastern District of Texas, federally here, the federal courts in the Eastern District of Texas here in the great state of Texas, they developed an absolute expertise in IP law.
Yes.
And so you would have companies from all over the country that would file their lawsuits in the Eastern District of Texas because the judges, they didn't set up any specialty courts. The judges themselves just became really familiar with IP law. So that would be something that would be doable, to where you would have your designated federal judge in a district that is your human trafficking expert judge.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That's great.
And in that, they'd get the reps. And then we would even look at, and I'm kind of toying with it for this next upcoming session, where when the survivor goes into court, we want to extend the same accommodations that we give kids,
Right.
where you can have the two-way video, where maybe they can have a support animal with them. Maybe they have an advocate in court with them. Maybe instead of walking down the center aisle where they're the trafficker and all the trauma, maybe they enter in the court somewhere different. So that would be more under like the rules of court. But if we can begin to understand the crime more effectively, we're going to be able to not only serve our survivors, but we're going to be able to make some examples out of some folks. And I think if we can create this to where you make trafficking unthinkable, like just have it be unthinkable, where you're going to think twice before you start trafficking individuals, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking.
Right.
So it's something that's really potentially exciting. I could just do something in Texas where we start with just ensuring that the human trafficking survivors get those accommodations. Like that could be an incremental change.
So that could be something, so that would be, and I'm just, free legal advice.
You're watching it live, folks. This is all ideas.
This is right.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is a better conversation, right?
And this is exactly how we got to 4623, actually.
It's fun. It's you bring up sitting at the resolution. I also remember sitting at a hotel, restaurant, bar, being like, "All right, how are we going to get stop sexualizing Texas kids? How are we going to get this as a priority, and what are we going to do with it?"
Yeah.
So a lot of judges get to make up the rules for their courts. So some of that might be done just through educating the judges. Because if you're a judge, and we learned this during COVID, you get to make the rules for what happens in your courtroom as far as decorum and all that sort of stuff. So that's something that judges can do. But, look, there's plenty of people running for the Court of Criminal Appeals right now. Some of those people
You're not wrong.
make some rules at that level. It's not that they can dictate to the lower courts, but they essentially put out a special order or general order, something like that kind of give permission to do some of these things, and that tears down a lot of barriers.
And it does. And I before I started working on this kind of the federal project, I created a curriculum for judges and prosecutors, specifically on how to navigate from the survivor-centric. We don't like to say victim-centric, but a survivor perspective of a training, because you and I both know, like CE, like what's the continuing education of a judge? Like if a 2-hour course in human trafficking, that doesn't even scratch the nothing.
Well,
it's
the hard part at the state level, because I was thinking about this as you were talking about wanting to implement different things. In Dallas, in some of the larger counties, you have specialty courts, right? We're in Dallas. You have criminal courts, you have felony courts, misdemeanor court. You have all sorts of different
business
stuff.
court or something
Right.
too. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying in Dallas County, but if you talk about 254 counties, most of those 254 counties have one judge. A lot of counties share a judge.
wow.
To where you will have one judge that will preside over multiple counties. That is their district, and they do everything from civil to criminal and everything in between. That's the hard space, in my opinion, for what you're trying
tough.
to do, because it's really hard, one, for those judges to have the same resources to do the specialization that they have here, but it's also those judges might see one trafficking related case every 2 years,
Exactly.
every 3 years, if that. So that's I know that you do a lot of stuff out in Wise County.
Yeah.
I think if memory serves, the Wise County district judge, whoever presides over I think also Jack County at least. I think Clay County and Montague County, they share a district court judge. That happens a lot all over the state.
I wouldn't be surprised if as this gets developed, that more survivors come forward, because this is kind of like a chicken or the egg, and you kind of hear it when you watch Cops or when you watch these documentaries. Like, I'm going to come forward and do what? Get my pimp or my boyfriend or whoever arrested for 30 days, and then he's going to beat the shit out of me.
That's right. Then he's going to come kill me.
Right. So it's they're not going to step forward to do this until they see till they start seeing a few of the public examples.
Gosh, we had such an opportunity with the P. Diddy case. It just
that's
breaks my heart, because that's
a
like,
tough one. That's a tough one.
because they're like, well, I mean,
yeah.
So it is interesting, and when you talk about the survivor perspective, I think this is a great opportunity to kind of shift the conversation into the application of HB 4623 and what we're seeing. I joked on September 1 that was my effective date. And I posted all the bills.
Did you change your birthday?
I did. I know I did. It's my effective date. So what an effective date means, for those of us that are kind of in the space, is where your bill goes into effect. The bill that I worked so hard on, or the bills that I worked so hard on, go into effect. And some of the absolute champions of the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids team, we all called each other and they were like, "It's your effective date." So one of the bills that we're actually seeing, which Chris had mentioned how important it is for it to be tried in court. We need case law, right? Unfortunately, we have legislative, but in the reality, it's almost like case law is what dictates oftentimes so much of how well suited and well drafted these bills are. So 4623 right now is in play and is in play huge. So for those of our folks that are watching, you may or may not have heard, because my husband hadn't heard about it, and he keeps his ear to the ground on Celina, which is north of us. We're obviously all in Dallas, but what's
Right
going?
now.
Yeah, right. Currently,
Some of us aren't in
oh, that's
Dallas.
right. You're right.
Yeah,
He meant to
yeah.
play. But in Celina, you guys may have heard about this situation, and the situation, as much as it may shock some of our listeners today or our viewers, this is more common than you can possibly imagine. Of where we have a teacher in the Celina Independent School District who's facing multiple lawsuits under HB 4623 right now. Here's the backstory, and it's very long and exciting, but I'm just going to really shorten it up for the sake of not like going on and on and on. Yeah. So there was this teacher who was young, and he went into a school, and his name, Elliott's his last name, and it's Caleb Elliott. And he goes, and he was a substitute teacher, right? Fresh out of school, young. And he goes into Celina High School, where his dad happens to be the head coach, right? Bill Elliott. Just remember that. So he goes in, and he is a young substitute teacher, and he starts having a inappropriate relationship with a student. She was 18 at the time. And people started to notice that he was on his phone and joking about how she's blowing it up, and he was having FaceTime sessions with her, and he was kind of isolating her and being very jealous when they were talking about her dates. And this evolved into the point where they went and talked to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor made a note in the file saying, hey, you got to back off a little bit. This is kind of, I know that you're just wanting to be a coach and a mentor, but you need to back off because she, the victim, has boundary issues. That was a sticky note that was in her file.
What a cover.
So I this is the lawyer in me. This is what's being reported on.
That's
right.
I knew this was coming.
This is what's being
disclaimer,
reported on.
Disclaimer.
And it's,
none of us have personal knowledge of this.
This was what was inside of the, this is information that was from the inside of the case that's been filed.
Right.
And what has been, to your point, this is the alleged story, right?
Why so vague? Sorry to interrupt, but why so vague? It's always inappropriate relationship, and it's like so vague from going from text messages all the way to having a baby
right.
with a student. Like, why is that so? Because
that's a classification, and because this individual did not file a complaint, it's been said that it was not sexual, as far as there was no contact, there was no physical contact that they know of, and so this was the dynamic of what other teachers, because other teachers actually were submitted complaints, concerns. They submitted concerns about this dynamic. And so what ended up happening is, allegedly, Bill, his dad, who was the coach at that school, ended up calling in a favor to a middle school, requesting, saying, hey, my kid wants a job, and he ends up getting a coaching job as a teacher in a middle school.
He won't hit on any of the middle schoolers.
So, of course not. So you've got this dynamic of they knew there was an issue, the principal knew there was an issue, other teachers knew there were an issue, to where there was multiple reports that there was an issue. I think it was 6, but let's just say multiple for the lack of lawyer in the room. Then this young man goes and becomes a teacher, a coach.
They send him out of there.
Send them away to more middle school.
Played the lemon game.
I believe that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And what has come out since then is that, once again, other teachers, as well as some parents, were saying that they have concerns because there was this coach would linger around the boys. The coach would inappropriate touch on the shoulders, or it was just, because, as parents, we know when it's off. We know, we can see it. We know there's something not right. And so finally, after about 2 years, there was an anonymous complaint made to the Celina Police Department. They ended up going in and finding hundreds of videos on this man's cell phone of him videotaping the young boys between the ages of 11 and 14 undressing in the locker room. And there have been 30 families were notified saying, we think we've got these videos and we believe that your kids are on these videos. So 30 families have now filed lawsuits, individual lawsuits. And the issue being that I think it was in October, they had a board meeting where the father was like, this is just, my son's a good son and I raised him right. But the concern, right, of all the information of all the other teachers who've said something, and there was no formal complaint made to TEA. How do I know this? Because I have all the names on the. I've checked my spreadsheet.
Control find, yeah.
That's right, and so it wasn't ever reported to the TEA. Now, the issue at hand is if they knowingly and willingly covered up this issue, and now the board's panicking. The principal has been personally, a lawsuit's been filed against the principal at Moore Middle School. You've got the father, Bill, who has been now put on unpaid leave from Celina High School. You've got, in fact, there's been another incident at Moore Middle School, which wasn't of a sexual nature, but it was of a teacher who's sitting in jail now for being intoxicated while being around children. So this isn't something that is a problem that's happening over there. It's literally in our backyard. Mm-hmm. And if we have administrators unwilling to do the right thing, administrators turning the other cheek in a culture of cover-up, that's why 4623 exists, is to say, not on our watch. And if you knowingly and willingly, I get it. Like, there's times if you do something and it was taken wrong and somebody came to you and said, hey, man, this is a problem, and you change your behavior. But the fact that the inappropriate contact with the female student that was 18 years old, and then you move down into a lower age group from 11 to 14, and it's boys, what we know statistically is when groomers begin this process of grooming, 80% of the time, it turns into actual contact, actual abuse and assault. And so this is everything that we talked about that should not be happening in our schools.
So I want to ask, for the sake of educating people, I want to ask a few questions that people may have about this. One is, so obviously, as is reported, there was no physical contact between the teacher and the 18-year-old girl.
Correct.
And if there was, she was 18, right?
That's right.
Why would that be something that you would expect to be reported?
Because teachers have, under the Texas Education Code, there's an ethical responsibility. So there's conduct that is not allowed under that accountability, right? So you've got to look at so many different components, just like the whole reporting conversation we had. You've got to look under their ethical codes and the teacher misconduct, the very clear line of demarcation between teacher and student, and
Right.
behavior. Yeah. I'm not going to say behavior becoming of, because that's more military, but it's behavior becoming of.
I mean, it still holds true though. The behavior of coming, it's like it's still you're an authority figure. That's why we have the situation where, hey, you can't date your subordinates at work, or you shouldn't, right. Or we have the even like to go all the way to the White House. We have the Monica Lewinsky, like, oh, well, she was an adult, I'm an adult, like, yeah, but you're the President of the United States and this is your intern, like,
Right.
Abuse of power.
Well, I think, isn't there something in Texas where it is not permitted it doesn't matter the age, for a teacher and a student to be in a relationship?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Why does that go out the window with, I could be wrong, but professors and students, college students? That's allowed though, right?
No.
Well, that depends on the university.
Okay.
So there's not like a state law or something like that that would prevent at the
Yeah.
college level, but most universities have those internal policies.
I've heard that before, and first time I heard that, I was like, that can't be true, and that also bugs me. I get it that like you're an adult or whatever,
Oh
but
my
it's
gosh.
still the dynamic there is just not
It's a
right.
power.
Right. All right. So you said that there have been these lawsuits that are filed.
Mm-hmm.
Were they filed in state court, federal court? What I mean, I would imagine state court.
I love that question as a non-attorney.
Okay. I guess
Yeah.
I'll have to
You'll have to do
use
some-
my research skills to figure that one out.
You never asked me any law questions. Ask me where they're filed.
Are they filed in?
I'm about to ask Chat.
I know. Go ahead. He's like, wait. Find out in ChatGPT where they're filed. But
So how will 4623 apply to this situation?
well, if it's found out that the administrators knowingly and willingly covered up these misconduct complaints and the sexual misconduct of this individual and placed him in an environment that he could access these kids, then they can sue the school district. And they can also sue, of course, they can already sue the individuals involved as well. But suing the school district would then, that pierces that sovereign immunity and gives them a civil remedy. So they could actually, and it's $500,000 per child. That is
Is the max.
the max amount.
It says Collin County District Court.
All right, state court it is. That's what I figured is a state law. I didn't imagine they had federal claims, so.
I just want to
Unless
kind
they
of
went across state lines, right?
So you can have federal statutes that may apply, like 1983, if you have a constitutional violation. That it doesn't matter if you're across state lines. That would
Okay.
still give a federal court jurisdiction. But since 4623 would be only state law, it would, unless there were, which you couldn't have because they're within the same school district in Texas. So you would
Yeah.
definitely have that.
just like to kind of empathize here for a second, or kind of put ourselves in the situation of there's the head coach. And he was out of college though, right?
He was out of college, and his dad was the head
head
coach
coach.
at Celina High School.
Right.
And his dad allegedly called in a favor to have his son to give his son a shot. I guess they quoted in the complaint some of these email strings where it said, "Give my kid a shot. He deserves it." There was no background check done. There was no investigation into that issue with that other student. So there was several missteps.
Was there an investigation done into the initial complaints?
Into
Do
the
we know
initial
that? Is that
into the initial complaints.
with the 18-year-old girl?
What my understanding was no, there was no formal investigation. There was kind of like they just kind of agreed to disagree, and just there was no formal investigation opened up on that individual.
Okay.
The Star local media did report that when the only thing that was on his file when he went over to the middle school was that there was inappropriate conduct in his file, but it was like there was nothing deeper than that. But just
It didn't say inappropriate conduct with a student or just in general.
just inappropriate conduct, and I think it got swept under the rug. But I'm just wondering, like,
That's what's being reported.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Just for the rest of the podcast, it's just what's being reported. But I'm just like trying to put myself in their position. Like, you're the principal, and you have this weird dynamic of like the coach, the son, the other. You have this 18-year-old. Like, did her parents know? And then it's like, okay, well, this is not a good spot for them. I'm just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and like kind of play this out. Of obviously it's inappropriate. We've already kind of said like, hey, that dynamic's not correct. But I mean, it's not. It doesn't sound criminal at this point.
Well,
And so
the videoing the 11 to 14-year-olds.
I'm talking about
The
the
18-year-old girl.
in high school,
Got it.
right before they
Yes.
transfer this
Okay.
this person, right? It's like, okay, we have an issue of what degree we really don't know.
That's right.
I mean, are these are the administrations equipped to handle? I mean, is there an SOP? This is what you do when you run into this situation, or is it literally just every principal is out here like willy nilly, like I'm gonna armchair this one?
Well, the Texas election code is pretty clear, but I think to the point.
Teachers code. We're not talking about elections.
I mean, sorry,
Education code.
education. Yes, yes, yes. The
She's
other
ready for the next topic.
The other TEC. So it's really clear, and to your point, there was she didn't the 18-year-old didn't report. There was allegedly no actual contact, and so it's like, okay, this is kind of sketchy, and so to your point, we move him to middle school where maybe the age gap is larger, and it would be a more
Like a buffer.
yeah, like it'd be like, because he's a guy and she was a hot girl and she was a cheerleader, and so I can kind of understand moving him to a different environment. What I cannot understand is when the parents started to say, hey, you're kind of touching my kid, or there's lingering and a little too much attention to the boys, and the boys making the complaints that person wasn't removed immediately.
So that's the thing. So this
That's
is why I'm
where
trying
it's-
to unpack some of this. Is at the high school, was he going to be let go at the high school, or was he going to continue at the high school? Because it sounds like he wasn't disciplined. So if he had to move to the middle school, was there do you know if there was a plan to remove him at the high school, or would he just continue as a high school teacher?
He was a substitute teacher, so it could have been there wasn't a permanent place for him. Maybe he was ready for. I
Okay.
don't. Maybe because he was just a sub.
So he's a sub. Okay, that actually adds some context. So he was
So
a
he was a
sub in the
substitute.
district,
So maybe he's
And
like a
his-
long-term sub.
and
There's
his
a lot of these
dad
right now.
his dad works for the district. He's a coach. Do you know what he coaches?
He was Celina, I believe it's the football coach at
Okay.
Celina.
So he's a football coach, and he says, "Hey, my son's a sub. I want him to get a full-time teaching and coaching
Yeah.
job. I'm going to recommend him to the middle school."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Within the ISD, so they would goes from the Celina High to Moore
Right.
Middle.
And then, but while he's at the middle school, there are complaints made about him and some of the behaviors with the students at that school. You said they were made by other teachers and by parents?
By parents, other teachers, and then apparently, when the way he was caught was the Celina police were the ones. It wasn't and Celina does have their own independent school district police, so it wasn't the internal police.
Right.
It was external, and then they went in, and when they found those, at least 100. I'm not going to say hundreds, but 100 or more videos, and so that's why it's for child porn.
Right.
And that's like up to life in prison, right?
Yeah. Okay. How do we know, is it reported whether or not there was ever any investigation into those initial complaints at the middle school?
I haven't seen anything. I saw that one little thing where it's like when he got the transfer, there was some like footnote that the reason he got transferred.
Well, but my thing is, did he get transferred? Because if he was a sub and he just got hired on as
He just got hired on
full-time
full-time,
at the
so-
middle school, my question was more not about his conduct at the high school, but the complaints that were made about him at the middle school.
And it would be interesting to find out, and you may be able to find this on, our fellow Rock or IA, is that when did those complaints begin? It's my understanding, if I recall correctly, that they began pretty quick after he got there. So it wasn't like the complaints, nothing happened until the end. I believe it was the first complaint came in pretty quick, like within a couple months of him getting there, and then that build up, right?
This is a great thing about it being in litigation. We'll probably find all that stuff out.
Yeah.
Because I will say that if I was the lawyers representing the school and there had not been complaints made, well in advance, or there had been an investigation into the complaints. I probably am going to be putting that in some sort of plea or motion early on in the process to try to get the case dismissed. So I'll be interested to see how it's defended with all that. But
Well, and it also is, you know, I find it fascinating that we're getting like more middle school had the other teacher who was apparently recently arrested and put in jail for allegedly being under the influence of alcohol, right? So, and then there was recently somebody else at the Celina High School that was a wrestling coach, and he did AI generated sexual images of kids from a prior assignment, the school that he was at before. So I don't know if we're being more vigilant. I don't know if maybe parents are being more sleuthy and they're out there being more looking up their teachers, doing background checks, using our AI tools to find more information out if they feel like something isn't right. They're taking matters into their own hands much more than like if we think about when I was a student, like I didn't even know if my teachers really ate lunch. I didn't know like when they went to the bathroom because like they were always in class. I didn't know if they were married. And I came from a small town of like 1,000 to 2,000 people. And unless I saw them out in public, I had no context of their lives.
Which was always weird, right?
100%.
Seeing your teacher at the
100%.
store, you're like, what?
What? Or my principal? Ugh. And because there was that level of authority and there was that respect and there was that and that we don't have anymore because those boundaries have been woven too close. So I think it'll be interesting to follow this case, and I do believe that that the school board, like it said, you know, it's been reported that the first school board meeting that this was brought up, since then we've had another school board meeting, and there were like 3 times the amount of people. You've got the public just enraged. Mm-hmm. You've got the 30 parents, and then there's more filings every day.
Well, that'll be, if I remember right, the bill had some language in it that was essentially they had to know or reasonably should have known or something to that
Yes.
effect. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the lawsuit, because one of the questions is going to be, you know, because it was sort of a deliberate indifference standard, if I remember right,
Yeah.
is what 4623 had in it, where if the administrators knew or reasonably should have known that there was a high level or degree of risk, I think generally with the languages, I don't have the bill memorized, but that'll be something that'll be litigated. That'll be something that, you know, there should be motion practice done on to where you'll be able to see. Now, of course, because it involves minors, there'll be a lot of sealing of records and a lot of abbreviations so that, you know, the children's names aren't put out there. But I will be supremely interested to see how that's litigated.
You know, to that point, should have known, like that knowledge of reasonable known. So from a legal perspective, define that for me. Like,
So there's different standards for knowledge usually when you have negligence claims, tort claims, things along those lines. And so actual knowledge is you knew for a fact that this was happening, right? I actually know that you're sitting next to me. Reasonably should have known is sort of this standard of there was information presented to you that you were aware of, or if you had been otherwise doing what you were supposed to do, you would have detected this. It exists to sort of lower the standard a little bit. It's still a high standard.
yeah.
Is, okay, well, if you had been acting reasonably, you would have known that this was an issue. And it's not just that the issue exists, but it's also that there is this high level risk of harm. Like that's the other part of reasonably should have known. So, and I can't help myself as a defense lawyer. If I'm defending the case, which I'm not, I don't do school stuff, I don't represent TASB or anything like that. But I mean, that would be a question that I would raise would be, well, the fact that this guy had an inappropriate contact or whatever with a
Relationship, yeah.
of age woman, a female, right? would that have created that reasonably should have known that there was a high level degree of risk that he would act inappropriately with young boys?
With the next assignment. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's one of those sort of questions that there. Now, of course, if there's already reports coming in that he's acting inappropriately with the boys, and those reports aren't investigated, nobody's looking into it, people are kind of, if you're the ostrich with the head in the sand, that's why reasonably should have known exists.
So it will be interesting to see when they said that other teachers and families came forward, like to your point, like how did they come forward?
Right.
Was it like at the soccer game going, that's a little, he's lingering a little too much.
Right.
Or is it, I'm going to the principal's office, I'm sitting with the principal saying, I have concerns as a parent that there's a problem.
Exactly.
Like there's that distinction, right? Of it being nuanced and rumored versus, no, we had a formal meeting with either the teacher or the supervisor or the whoever, or there was a written complaint that this is a problem.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting.
That those sort of facts need to shake out, which we'll see how they do. What I'm glad is that this is something that's being taken very seriously.
Yeah.
It's something that the AG is involved with. You talk about Jeff Leach, and Jeff Leach is very much involved in this. Mitch Little's very much
Yes.
involved with this. Like, there are a lot of powerful eyes that are monitoring this situation. So that's a thing that makes me like, it's awful. I hope that this never happens again. Unfortunately, we know that it is. It makes me feel good to know that enough people care that this is happening, and not to be too, like, even though it's boys, right?
That's
Because
right.
the thing is often like, if something happens to a little girl, I think everybody grabs the pitchforks, right? Everybody's grabbing. There was a South Park episode over
Right.
this, right?
Yeah.
Where there was I bet
I
you
don't-
didn't know how anti-human trafficking South Park
Yeah, I
was.
was going to say, I
But there
didn't
was
see
a
that
whole
one.
well, there was a whole episode about a female teacher that was having, and this was like a teacher and a kindergartner sort of thing, where they were having this inappropriate relationship,
Yeah.
all the way inappropriate on South Park, as you would expect.
Yeah.
But the part of the commentary of it was nobody in authority cared because it was a little boy. And there was a running joke throughout the whole episode where it was just like, you would tell the chief of police and he would just go, nice.
Yeah.
Somebody give that boy a medal,
Yep.
that sort of thing.
Yep.
So I'm glad to see that little boys are getting that protection as well.
Yes, and that is so huge because right now, to the best of my knowledge, when we look at in the human trafficking space, we only have one safe house in this country that accepts men, and that is here in Texas, and it's Bob's Ranch, and it's more and more and more. We're getting calls on boys. And
It's bad, but it's
but
good
it's
that you're
good
getting the calls.
because also to your point, like think about all these female teachers having these inappropriate relationships with these 14 and 15-year-old boys. Boys just think that they're just cool, like they're like high-fiving each other, like nailing it. They don't understand that
Right.
it is as corrupt, and it will break those precious little brains as they're developing, and the frontal cortex, of course, isn't quite there yet, and it will change the trajectory of their life and their relationship to sex, their relationship to women, and putting those pieces back together. We've got a big responsibility.
Yeah, actually, to Chris's point, you see that joke still today, and when you see these stories, like everyone's in there, like, but I recently listened to a testimony of one of these teenage boys who is now like 20 years old, but he seems deeply hurt by this. Like, he really does seem affected by it, and I really never thought about it, but I was scrolling, and then it opens up with a pretty dramatic scene. I stopped and I was like, huh. Like, I don't know, I just never really thought about it, but it's like, you think, oh, you're a teenage boy, and of course all you can think about is sex, and here's a teacher. But yeah, it did, to your point, it really seems to have a drastic effect on his mind that it's going to follow him forever.
Well, and that's why, I know.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the movie Varsity Blues,
100%.
right? There's a whole scene in Varsity Blues where 4 high school students go to a strip club in town, which they're allowed to go to, and their sex ed teacher is dancing on the stage and then comes sits with them.
Like it's totally
That's
normal.
how it's, when it comes to guys, that's always how it's portrayed.
Well, and when we think of, when we talked about 4623 having teeth, the cap per child is 500,000. And when we were in that process, and legislators were concerned that this could bankrupt our districts. And, I didn't say this, but one of the people testifying said, well, maybe we should be doing background checks. Maybe we shouldn't be hiring pedophiles, right? Yes, and that 500,000 is so impactful. I know it's kind of gross to be thinking about putting a price tag on our children and on their innocence and their entire future relationships, specifically when it comes around sex and relationships. But I'm telling you, like the average therapy that survivors require is, 250,000 easy just for ongoing therapy to help them remap the brain. The brain changes so profoundly during this abuse that if you took a snapshot of a brain on heroin and a brain that has been sexually abused or assaulted, the brains look the same.
Oh, wow.
Those scans look the same. It takes 2 years at minimum after the last incident for the brain to settle, to even begin to heal. So this is a profound move where 500,000 will clearly make a difference for the child, the family members, because even family members, quite frankly, we don't know how to deal with this.
Right.
My personal family, with my situation with my niece, it's like they don't talk about it. It's like,
Right.
It's so weird. And think about your niece being trafficked or your granddaughter being trafficked. And I'm like, guys, she's going to reintegrate back into society, and we need to know how to talk about it. We need like an Al-Anon for survivor families
Yeah.
so that we know how to support instead of naming or shaming it or the other, hiding it under the rug.
Right.
Like we've got to figure out wraparound services. We've got to, and so this conviction that if this person gets convicted, then the families will have access to not only that 500,000, but the state has already put allocation and resources to survivors.
That's good.
So when there is a conviction and there's that designation, that opens up the doors. But we just have to educate people that it's out there. So, yeah.
Well, it's a terrible topic,
Yeah.
but it's good to have some optimism that we're working in the right direction.
Yeah.
That we're understanding
100%.
it, we're combating it, we're trying to stop it before it happens. Because, again, what this guy did is heinous, but the great thing is that it was stopped before he took physical action with any of these boys. At least that's what we understand the situation to be
That's
right
right.
now. So you'd like to see that, because you talked earlier about, the criminal proceedings and civil cases. The courts are a terrible way to deal with problems. They're necessary sometimes, but it's terrible. You want to not have the problem in the first place.
Right.
And so some of the stuff as far as increasing an incentive for schools to be accountable hopefully prevents those things from happening.
Yeah.
Right? It's you don't want to, it sounds terrible to say, oh, well, if there's $500,000 per kid on the line, they're going to take precautions that they wouldn't have otherwise.
I know.
I don't think that it's that. But I'll just use in my world, in the legal world, there's often steps that companies, individuals, local governments take that they're not required to take, that they do to go above and beyond to make sure that they're able to beat any lawsuit that would come down the line.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's something that inspires them to think a little bit more in depth and wanting to get way out ahead of it, that's great.
And
that helps kids.
And it's about being proactive, right? Like we are such a reactive society. And I think oftentimes on the right, we tend to be very reactive. And so for the first time ever, let's start being proactive and let's put these safeguards in place so schools will be thinking that way. And the other thing is the other schools that are out there, I'm telling you, that they are they're going to be getting their stuff straight from an operational infrastructure and a process and procedures. I hope that this is the shockwave that they need in the great state of Texas, that every single school out there, that the superintendents and the principals dramatically change the way that they take these allegations and these complaints to where I want them to disprove it. Do you know? Like I'm on their side.
Right.
But until we're willing to lean into the pain
Yeah.
and face it,
Stop avoiding it. Yeah.
and I think the number was like 200 and I'm going to say around 245-ish to 250-ish teachers in the last 2 years have been arrested or indicted on such a charge. Now that doesn't compare to the 6,888 misconduct complaints,
Huge gap. Yeah.
but it's a start. Unfortunately, only like 3% were actually on that six out of that 233. Like only 3% of those were actually on the 6,888. I would love to have said, "Oh man, those 233, all of those names are on those complaint list," but it's not. So we need to continue the conversation. We need to continue eyes wide open.
Well, but part of it, and I'll just say, just because there is a complaint made doesn't mean that the person that's being complained against did something wrong.
That's right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talk about there being all these numbers of names on the list and all that sort of stuff. Like, I think part of it is also not to stigmatize just because a complaint has been made.
That's right.
Because that's part of the whole culture of cover up, right? I mean, you want to cover it up because if it gets out that this allegation or this complaint's been made, all of a sudden you're going to have the community be like, well, I don't want to send my kids to that school. There was a complaint made about one of the teachers there, like there's other factors that are involved where it's like
double-edged sword kind of deal.
Yeah, it's like you want to promote there being the complaint without, it's the old adage that you're innocent until proven guilty,
Yes.
right? You don't want to stigmatize everybody associated. You don't want to stigmatize the school because there's a complaint. It matters when there actually is something that is found. There's something that's substantiated. Because that's part of it, right? Because if everybody that gets put on that list is guilty, you are disincentivizing people getting put on that list. Right. You are disincentivizing because it's a colleague, it's somebody that you work with.
Yeah.
If I know that if I report you or if I report something, it's likely going to ruin you.
Right.
Well, I'm going to be more hesitant to make that complaint.
Or if you don't like that person, now it's a weapon.
It's retaliatory.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's also, that's why our battle cry was, look, the TEA, for whatever weird reason, which is the Texas Education Agency, is the department that investigates these complaints. They're administrative. They don't have the resources. They don't have the skill set.
Right.
And yet, to this day, with all the legislation that we passed, they're still the investigatory body. And they did slide in an IG-like department that reports to Marath. So that instead of it being an independent, it's just like one guy that's kind of responsible. And I'm like, guys, I would have rather an actual independent. But you know what? If you have to do that in order to allocate more resources, I think they have like 4 or 5 more people they're going to add in order for you to be able to investigate, in order for you to be able to clear these people's names.
So here's a, and I don't know if it works this way now or not, but generally speaking, when it comes to personnel files for police officers, if there's an IA complaint that's made, but the complaint is not sustained, right?
Yeah.
It's deemed to be insufficient. The officer is cleared. That it drops out of the personnel file.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Is there any record of that complaint ever?
I think there's still a record that the complaint was made, but
that
it's
it was
not
unsubstantiated.
Right. It's
So the
not,
case code, for lack of a better term, is
right. And so all the information isn't released. There's a
Yeah.
notation, but there's not the whole thing there. What about something like that as part of the process? Where it's like, look, if this is a sustained complaint, then we have a sustained complaint. But if we investigate it and the teacher's cleared or the coach is cleared, we're not going to keep this in their personnel file
That's
that this
right.
complaint was made.
That's right.
Or the details of the investigation
Right.
and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I would have to review 571, which I think we've got a solution that I've already got a couple of folks interested in sponsoring that would shore up the disconnect. I'm gonna say that Benton Court, it was unintended consequences of 4623 and SB 571. that they just weren't as clear. And so I have something that can fix those, that can shore up the disconnect.
Yeah.
And I need to verify that that's in there, but I need
Yeah.
to look. I have some really fun I have some fun language.
Legislative nerd.
I know. I'm so sorry.
But that's what happens with a lot of bills, right? Like they get passed, and then all these these things you did not foresee come to light, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna have to go back around and fix that.
And that's what's so beautiful about the interim session, right? Like this is so exciting. So most people are like, okay, it's done. And I'm like, no, we are now, right now, I'm ramping up resolutions by January to have for our precinct convention so that we can not infiltrate, but we can impact the Republican Party platform with language where we need to fortify it to protect Texas children so that when it's embedded into the priorities and the plank and platforms, all of a sudden I have a cohesive package. So looking at what we need to do during the interim is the time to study, and the interim is the time to educate. It is not the time to sit back on our laurels.
Well, that's one of the reasons, and again, unpopular opinion, but that's why it's not always the end of the world when a bill doesn't get passed the first time it gets pushed, right? Because when you're trying to push a bill through the first time, there is a lot that's unknown.
Yes.
There's a lot of the potential impacts that are unknown. And it's not a bad thing to have a bill pushed through a session, not enacted, then you have the interim session to fully flesh it out even further. That way, when the bill comes up during the next legislative session, what you passed is more considered, it's more well-reasoned, and it can be implemented in a better way.
And it's also fun fact, which you may already know this, but when you get ledge counsel, so you get an idea, and I draft like a one-pager, and we massage the language, we submit it to ledge counsel, which is the process where attorneys work. We've got, I think, 66 attorneys-ish, give or take, that just draft bills. And you get it out of ledge counsel, and ideally, you would keep that. You don't want whoever filed it for you with ledge counsel, their name on it, because you want to socialize that bill. So once it's out of ledge counsel, then you've got the language. Well, if you got your bill out of ledge counsel and you actually got a draft, and that language has been approved by ledge counsel, you're already way ahead of the game, because you can take that bill and start socializing it, and it's already been approved by ledge counsel. You make your amendments. So just doing amendments to that bill, much easier to get out.
Right.
when they're drafting, I think, 10,000 bills, and the process goes quicker and it's easier to socialize, because they're like, oh, well, that bill, somebody thought it was a good idea last session. We have tracks to run on versus an idea, versus like, well, I have an idea, I think we should do this.
Right.
So it really is an exciting time. And if anybody that's listening, that you've got ideas about bills, now is the time. This is the education phase. When we go back into session in 27, it's kind of too late.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
you need to, because you've got to educate these legislators, you've got to explain it to their staff, you've got to work through understanding which committees it could or could not go through, understanding the power structure in that committee, and sometimes, the most powerful guy in the room is not even on that committee, but he's the guy. And if you're boots to the ground, you'll find out who is the guy that needs to give the nod so that you can get that through. So it's some really exciting stuff. But
That's awesome. Yeah, I was sitting here thinking that the more that this is pushed on, the less likely that predators are going to go to these places like schools, right? I think that the vagueness of enforcement and kind of the buddy system, and was it filed, was it not, is it routed up, who's it going to? I mean, that's what predators thrive on, right? They thrive on other people's. I mean, if you ask predators, like, why did you pick this victim? Oh, well, because I saw that the parents were complacent.
That's right.
Or I saw this, or I saw that. That's where they thrive. And if we start, I guess, battening down the hatches, however you want to put that, they will go somewhere else.
well, and what we know is that predators need proximity.
Right.
Full stop. So schools, churches, sports, like anywhere where there's proximity. And so we've got to make grooming unthinkable. We have to be able to shift that to where that we are our brother's keeper. And the teachers out there and the staff and the janitors, all the important components of a school, all need to keep their eyes wide open. We did pass, I know that the SBOE last session did pass where we do require anti-human trafficking training in our curriculum.
State Board of Education.
Thank you. And so I don't know. I had a bill to require anti-human trafficking training for our education system, but I don't think that I didn't put a lot of effort into that because the SBOE already mandated it. But as you know, we can have all these things that the State Board of Education requires, and if there's no enforcement, so
Right.
you'll oftentimes have to like double dip and then draft legislation to fortify that so that if these schools don't, then there is,
Yeah. If someone's asking me to do corporate training and there's no enforcement mechanism, I'm definitely deleting that email.
it's good to know. It's
Yeah,
good to know.
I'm just not paying attention to it because a lot of times the training is boring.
Yep.
It's not just it's boring, but it's also not effective. It's like, okay, hey, thanks. And, it says, don't sexually assault people. Like, oh, geez. That's going to stop a
Yeah.
predator, And so effective training too, I guess really, I'm not sure what this training looks like, but I know the military had switched up its training and it was not like, hey, don't rape. It was like, these are signs to look for.
Right.
This is what these are things to look for from a victim. These are things to
Yeah.
look for from a predator. Like this is how you would, not put yourself at risk. This is how you do put yourself at risk. Kind of a different angle. Which was powerful.
Well, it's like the difference with Tami when you do your election volunteer training, right? I mean, instead of just the standard fall asleep, Dallas County votes, whatever, elections department training, going over how to fill out forms and whatnot, you're teaching people, here's potential fraud that you need to be looking out for. Here is activities that you're going to see, people that are improperly electioneering, what they're going to do, like here's what to look out for.
Yeah.
That sort of practicality in the training is what's vital, because otherwise, to Kyle's point, it's a check the box activity.
Well, and we want, our goal is bringing children, we want age appropriate anti-human trafficking training for kids in the school, because you have to be able, kids need to know, it's like, well, you're probably too young, stranger danger, right?
Oh yeah, I remember
Stranger Danger.
Come on
Like
now.
that was so great. And yet now I'm getting into cars with strangers because they're driving me in Uber.
Mm-hmm.
I've got strangers bringing me food. Well, they don't ever bring us food. We've never done like the Uber Eats thing. Like now somehow those lines have gotten really blurry. So if we can train kids what to look for,
Yeah.
and kids can look after each other, they can say that's not right.
Tami, I have seen programming for children that says a stranger is just a friend that you don't know yet.
Yeah.
Like, it's a totally different world on that sort of
Yeah.
front.
Well, we got our work to do.
But, wait, go.
So we're filing a lot of bills. When are we going to start upping the punishments?
Okay.
That's
Okay.
what we need
when,
to do.
So-
when Tami said, let's make grooming unthinkable, I was like, what medieval ideas are stewing in Kyle's head right
I got
now?
a few.
All right. So, great state of Florida.
Yeah.
Raping a child, death penalty.
Yeah. So that was.
That's I've got that in several states. Is, you know what? You mess with our kids, death penalty.
I hear this thing about death row. People are on death row for 30 years or something. I mean, like, what's the enforcement? Of
Oh, you would
getting
prefer
it?
immediate death.
No.
I would
no.
No.
But like I know.
I hear what you're saying.
I know that. A fair trial. Why are you standing around here for so long? Also, or like some countries, I don't know, chemical castration.
It's unconstitutional. We can't do that.
Oh, is it?
Cruel and unusual punishment, Eighth
Damn.
Amendment.
And maybe I would say, like, okay,
was a big
granted
sigh that I just let out.
we've got several states that have the death penalty for raping a child.
Right.
However,
Right.
I believe it's going to be tested. I believe that I don't know if they're able to actually follow through on that,
So at least
Go
they're.
through on,
on executing them,
yeah.
because I think there's a constitutional. Don't you have to go back in and redefine
Yeah.
whatever that state's constitution state. You have to make sometimes constitutional amendments,
Yeah.
because what the definition of
I think you're probably, the federal if there's a state constitutional issue, I wouldn't know. From a federal standpoint, you would probably be okay with that. But here's my thing: I don't want him put to death. I want him in prison in general, Pop.
So
That's my thing.
Yeah.
That's my look. That to me is a fate far worse than death. Is to be the child molester in general population at a prison.
that so as like years have gone by, I've actually become less fond of the idea of the death penalty of evil people, and just the thought of not being able to leave a building for the rest of my life
Right.
is absolutely terrifying.
Right.
Regardless of who my neighbors are, whatever the situation, just being like locked away because I like frolicking, I like going outside, I like the sun,
I like frolicking.
I like going here, I like going there, but just the thought of like, man, this sucks. Seems so much. Someone had asked me like, oh, like what do you think? Utah's going after the death penalty for this assassin. I'm like, I think that's the wrong angle. I think that you just have somebody locked up for the rest of their life in a really old age. Just terrifying.
I have the older I used to be like pro death, but like pro like almost instant death penalty gal.
Right.
But as I've gotten older and wiser,
Right. Sure.
I am pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I am pro-life consistently from the womb all the way through. And so I wrestle with that, with the death penalty, because I am pro-life. And if I want to protect the most vulnerable, and I know an eye for an eye, and I know that there's biblical references that we can make, but
Right.
I struggle with it, to your point, where it's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to be on that jury making those kinds of determinations. I kind of am pro like hard labor. Like why don't we put our prisoners to actual, like I want them on
Kamala Harris
like
move.
little,
Yeah, I like
want
that.
them on little bikes. I want them on little bikes that make electricity, and they have to do 20 hours a day on a stationary bike, or like something more.
Something more proactive. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
something more that contributes. But
I get it. So I think I would generally say that I'm against the death penalty, and it's for religious reasons, right? That's sort of Catholic teaching would be not universally against the death penalty, but in the U.S. at least against the death penalty, because as a nation we have the resources to take dangerous people out of society and away from really being a threat to anybody else. And so at that point, okay, fine, if I'm putting you in solitary confinement for the rest of your life, we have the resources to do that without putting the person to death. But the other part of me, the lizard part of me, however you want to put it, is just like, no, I want that person dead.
Right.
I mean, it's just one of those things, like you hear about terrible crimes against children, and the first thing is like, there is a famous viral video of a father who's sitting there at a phone bank as the police walk the guy that killed or sexually abused his son, and the dad just turns around and pops him in the head with a pistol, and you see it and it just feels good. Like you see that and you know that man has just taken evil out of the world, and it feels good. But it probably shouldn't feel good.
Maybe a good compromise is to redefine when we give somebody life in prison, what we need to change is natural life. Because when we give somebody a life sentence, they're out in 23 years or whatever. They get like special this and they get that and good behavior.
Right.
So why don't we do till natural life, which means you're going to die there.
So we have that. We don't call it natural life, but there are some life sentences that are without parole, where it is you truly are there for the rest of your life.
For
until
your
you
natural,
die. Right. Or you'll have certain offenses where instead of saying a life sentence, it's your sentence to 99 years or something like that, where it is you will be here until you die. There is no chance of parole. So we do have that. It's a matter of what offenses that's allowed.
That's right.
Or on the flip side, what offenses that would be mandated, right? So it's a matter of, look, if you are committing a certain crime, we're going to remove judicial discretion as a legislature and say, look, if this person did this to a kid, they're just done.
That's right.
And some of it to me, and this is sort of like the weird, like you talk about normalizing, where the left is sitting there and trying to say, oh, well, it's a minor attracted person. It's they're born this way. This is their almost the same sort of this is their orientation type of argument.
Yeah.
And when those arguments are made, to me, it doesn't make me sympathetic anymore to the person. It makes me say, oh, then we definitely need to lock them up for the rest of their life, right?
Yeah.
If you're telling me that this
Right.
person has an unquenchable predilection towards,
Yeah.
trying
Mental,
to
Yeah.
have sex with kids, oh, they gotta go, right?
Yeah.
That person's got to be locked up for the rest of their
Forever.
life.
Yeah. Oh, and also you're supporting a predator.
Yeah.
Put you on the list too.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy,
That-
Well, Tami, thank you so much for joining us.
It's always a joy.
Really appreciate you giving us your time and your expertise, all the work that you do for survivors. I didn't say victims, for survivors, for their families. The great work that you do with the Better Dallas, we always certainly appreciate that. You've got some events coming up. You got some things you want to share with the people that they should know about.
Well, we have a gala, a Christmas gala. We've got a couple of them, actually. The Dallas County Republican Party has one coming up on the 6th, which the topic
December.
of December, thank you. And the topic is human trafficking. So it would be, if this is interesting, I know you're like, well, that's kind of a really deep topic for a Christmas event. I would say, there's a lot of really good things that are happening throughout this country, and we see so much hope and beauty every day on women and children being recovered, lives being restored, people coming out of the woodwork to support and help others, and identifying the most vulnerable and figuring out what they can do in their own families. Because at the end of the day, guys, we've got to fortify our own families. And then, of course, A Better Dallas,
Better Dallas.
is having a Christmas event on December 11th.
Yes, confirmed. We'll be at celebrations here in Dallas on December 11th at 7 o'clock. So, yeah.
That's going to be amazing. Yeah, so that's about it.
I will also plug, it's not in a Better Dallas event, but a Better Dallas worked with the Leadership Institute to have a campaign school here last month.
Yes.
They're coming back. They'll be up in Plano on November the 8th. So this upcoming Saturday, all day. Go check out the Leadership Institute website. They'll have the information board. It's an amazing, they've got Glenn Youngkin's campaign manager, or maybe it was his general consultant, whatever. The guy that ran his campaign, he'll be there. It's a fantastic day if you're interested in running for office, or if you're interested in supporting people that are running for office. It's great. Highly recommend it. But yeah, look, here's the thing. I think anti-human trafficking is perfect because they were protecting baby Jesus from
100%.
the evil king, right? King Herod.
100%.
So it makes
It's
sense
totally
to me.
appropriate.
It
Yeah.
totally makes sense to me. But, well,
I love
Tami,
it.
thank you. Kyle, do you
Yeah.
have any closing thoughts?
Last thing, I want you to try to teach at least me, or if everyone else, how do you find 36 hours in a 24-hour period?
Yeah.
Nah.
The amount of things you do. I'm like, what? What does she do? She's in where? Where is she doing it?
Yes.
It's crazy. So we're thankful to have you
Oh,
around and
thank
all
you.
the knowledge that you bring to us. And right here is you did something, and now it's affecting change in the in our local community. So that's awesome.
Well,
I
thank
want
you
to
so
see.
much.
I want to see like a Carmen Sandiego get up. Like you're all over the place.
Yes.
Like where in the U.S. is
Where
Tami
is
right
she?
now? You need one of those big yellow hats.
That's right.
So that you can update your social media, which is another thing I want you to tell people. Where can they find you? Because you're always doing stuff. You always have events. You're always doing things. You're always educating. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so look for real TBR _TX. Real TBR _TX on all the socials, on Facebook, on Instagram, on I think TikTok even. I'm not very active there, and on X. Check it out. Fun stuff going on.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thanks.
Tami. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.